Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. Well, if you're looking for some nice late romantic music to while away the hours during the winter season when the skies are gray and the chill wind is blowing through the eaves, if that's where you happen to live, you might want to consider this. This is fun. Joseph Bohuslav Foerster, Symphony No. 2, which gets the big billing, and Cyrano de Bergerac. They ought to be reversed. They really should. I mean, the big billing thing. Foerster is known today as an FOM, a friend of Mahler. That's why people talk about him, and for his Fourth Symphony, Easter Eve, or whatever it's called. It's a charming work. Kubelik recorded it back in the dawn of the early eras in 1930s or 40s, and other people have done it since. It's a good work, actually. But as a composer, Foerster is problematic, and I'll tell you why. You hear it really very clearly here. First of all, he had an extremely long life. He lived from 1859 to 1951. In addition to being a friend of Mahler, he had a big, long career. His music is late romantic, Brahms, Strauss, Germanic. He was Czech. It's not terribly Czechy sounding. But the Second Symphony is all of the best of him and the worst of him in a clump. The best of him is he had a gifted orchestration. His harmony is rich and yummy. His tunes are, sometimes memorable and sometimes not. But the music is totally tensionless. And you hear this over and over again in his works, actually, at least the orchestral pieces that I've heard. The Symphony No. 2 is an F major, which is usually a pastorally kind of sounding key, and it is here. It begins allegro moderato, then it has an andante sostenuto, which seems to move at exactly the same speed as the allegro moderato, then a scherzo marked allegro, and a finale marked allegro con brio, which seems to move at exactly the same performance as the andante sostenuto. I mean, it's not the performance. The performance is very good. You can tell the performance is very good. It's committed. It's beautifully recorded. Marek Štilec is a fine conductor, and this orchestra, the Hradec Králové Philharmonic Orchestra, is good. I mean, they're a good sounding band, and as recorded here anyway, they sound luscious and succulent and rich and vibrant. I mean, it's a beautiful production. I don't think it's the fault of the performance, because I've heard a lot of other music by Foerster, and it always seems to come down to the same thing. He just didn't have a very wide emotional range as expressed in musical contrast. In the ability to give us enough variety while sustaining a lengthy musical argument. And of course, the fact that it's a symphony makes things a little bit worse, because it's not the most conservative thing. It's not anal retentive. It's really not. He uses a triangle. There's a bass drum in the finale. I mean, it's not the standard stuff, but it still has almost no tension. I mean, just listen to the ending of the finale. Well, first of all, it seems to end, and then it starts up again, and then when it really ends, it doesn't sound very convincing as the ending. I mean, things like that. You don't get this feeling of culmination, of arrival. I mean, that's what you need in a symphonic discourse. Somehow, however you do it, whether it's tonal, atonal, chromatic sludge, or diatonic bliss, whatever you want, it's got to have that feeling of progress, narrative, conclusion of some kind. Anyway, it's pretty moment by moment. It really is. But it just sags. I'm sorry, it does. Anyway, Cyrano de Bergerac is another matter entirely. Composed of, the symphony was 1892-93. Cyrano is 1903. And it's a big, yummy tone poem. Obviously, you know the story. And it's in 5 movements. 1, 2, 3, yes, 5 movements. None of which, well, the longest one is 9 minutes, but the others are 6 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, that sort of thing. Smaller sections, freer forms. You know, it doesn't have to go from point A to point E or whatever where you're going. You know, it's character music. There's a waltz. There's stuff happening. There's gestural music. There's much more colorful orchestration, luscious writing for harp and percussion and all that stuff. Bigger orchestra, a revelry in tone color, which Foerster was quite good at. I mean, he writes beautiful, beautiful, mellifluous orchestral sounds. And so the whole thing is much more successful. And it hasn't been recorded very often. I mean, there was a version on Orfeo, like a bazillion years ago. And that was how most of us, me included, got to know Foerster's larger works. And of course, Superfon had one. And, but it's not a lot. There's not a lot of Foerster out there. And so this performance is very, very welcome. The whole piece is shorter than the symphony. It's 32 minutes, basically. The symphony is about 36. And far more eventful. Just vastly more eventful. And it makes all the difference because Foerster could write. He really could. And this is a beautiful performance. Like I said, the orchestra sounds terrific. I mean, the strings are luscious and the horns whoop. And I mean, they're a good band, and Štilec conducts them well, and they're beautifully engineered and just like the symphony. But what a difference. And actually, even though I don't think the symphony is a great work, it's worth hearing, and it's worth hearing for the contrast. Because I think we learn things. We learn things listening to well-written, not great music compared to much better written, much better music, especially on the same disc by the same guy. It teaches us something about what our expectations are, how musical form operates. There was an enjoyable lesson here, in addition to the great enjoyment of having a fine modern recording of Cyrano de Bergerac. So I would recommend this for that reason alone. And you may like the symphony better than I did. You may not feel its relative lack of urgency, as the kind of deficit that I do. Your expectations may be different. All of that's fair and perfectly valid. And Foerster's a composer who deserves a bit of attention. So give it a shot and see what you think. And keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.